Good
Hiya.
evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Very relaxing Sunday. How's your
Oh,
Sunday been?
that's good. It's how we like it.
Yeah, how's your Sunday been?
Yeah, good. We've put up our Christmas tree this weekend. I know it's very controversial, but I know a lot of people have been doing it. And I think obviously at the moment with the mood sort of being a bit low and
Yeah,
just I just
yeah,
feeling. So all the lights, all of the hooga, yeah, it's all been happening this
yeah.
weekend.
We put ours up this weekend, so
Mm.
you're not alone.
Yeah, good. It feels
Ha,
like quite a split actually. I said to people earlier on my poll like who's putting up their tree, and I think it was like 60-40 yes. So we're in like the majority at the moment.
yeah. Oh, good, good, good. So, how have you been during this kind of lockdown period? How have you kind of been managing?
I feel like I think I found this second one easier. I think knowing being prepared, like knowing your experiences last time has definitely helped prepare me.
Hmm.
And also being able to meet a friend outside of exercise has been like I found that hugely beneficial because I sort of
Yeah,
really struggled on working by myself at home and then not being able to see anyone else was really difficult. So
of course.
yeah, and actually running's really helped me. So I started running like in the first. I've kind of got an on-off relationship with running, a bit of a love-hate relationship, but
Don't we all?
yeah, I kind of got into it more consistently during the second lockdown, and I've really just sort of been cherishing those runs as just reframe them completely as sort of mental health, sort of something I'm doing for my mental health. So yeah, it's felt better, and I'm just kind of embracing the opportunity to just hibernate a bit indoors and
Mm,
make it really cozy. It
yeah,
feels
yeah,
much easier to stay indoors when the weather's like this versus the summer when you just want to be outside. So
yeah. No, I totally agree. So, Laura, you're a dietitian.
mhm.
What is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
That's a good question. So we both study nutrition,
Mm,
but a dietitian is the only regulated healthcare professional, and only nutrition professional that's regulated. So
okay.
we're regulated by the Healthcare Professionals Council, and this is really to protect the public. So we have to have, in order to be called a dietitian, you have to have done a certain amount of training, been through specific degrees, and passed all of those, and then you join a register, and you have to continually sort of keep up to date with not just the research but your practice. And at any
Okay.
time you could be called on to let them know what you've been doing over the past 2 years to sort of keep up your not just your professional knowledge and your skills. And with nutrition, it's an unprotected title, so anyone can call themselves nutritionist. This doesn't
Okay.
mean there aren't good nutritionists out there. Like I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
several colleagues and friends who are excellent nutritionists, but you do have to be a bit more careful because somebody just using the title nutritionist or nutrition expert doesn't actually mean anything. So try to look for a nutritionist that is registered. So that's a voluntary kind of registration program through the Association for Nutrition. But yeah, a dietitian, it's illegal to call yourself if you're not one, and we are regulated. So yeah, that's
Good to
one
know.
difference.
So, what was your journey to becoming a dietitian? How did it start for you?
It's a really good question. So I actually wanted to be a chef when I was younger, and I am still hugely passionate about food.
Mm-hmm.
But I quite early on recognised that I didn't want to spend about 70 hours a week in a kitchen, which is a reality actually,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people working in that industry. So I sort of changed paths, and it was actually in a home economics lesson. I became fascinated by the fact that an egg contains so many different nutrients that has all these roles in the body.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I thought, okay, maybe I'd find nutrition interesting. Went off to study nutrition as an undergraduate and loved it, and then went on to do a master's degree. So I actually started off sort of more from a nutritionist perspective, and then realised that I actually wanted to work with people sort of more clinically and more on a one-to-one basis. So I went back to do my dietetics training in 2012. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, but it's a job I really love that
Yeah.
has so many kind of, you can work in so many different areas with it. So yeah, one for life, I think.
So, how do you operate your business? Is it purely one to one?
So it's a mixture. I used to work in what I would call for corporate healthcare, I guess. So I used to work with companies on encouraging staff sort of programs which would help with staff health and well-being. And then I moved into the NHS after I qualified as a dietitian. I was working there for about 3 years.
Okay,
And then I had a sabbatical in Mexico for about 6 months.
nice.
And I decided that I wanted to try the freelance path. So that
Okay.
actually looks quite different to hospital work. So part of my work is writing and helping with consumer education. So I work with a lot of brands on
Okay.
helping educate consumers around nutrition and their, sort of campaigns to help explain different topics, for example, gut health. I have a virtual clinic once a week where I see patients on a one-to-one basis. And then I write a column for Women's Health, and I do some recipe development for some brands. So it's a real mix at the moment.
Do quite a lot. Are there any kind of common issues that clients come to you with?
I guess most dietitians end up specialising in one or two areas. So the kind of areas that I sort of specialise in that people normally come to see me about are gut health.
Okay.
And more specifically IBS. So I've done quite a lot of work with people who've got IBS, and I have an online program as well and a podcast. And then the other area is, I'd say, weight loss, but very much in a sense of people wanting to improve their relationship with food. And typically by the time they've come to see me, they've probably tried lots of different diets and ended up in a place where they feel their relationship with food is quite troubled, and they're looking for somebody to sort of help them with that. So that's probably the two main areas. What's
the kind of common misconceptions that people kind of have when it comes to nutrition?
There are loads. Yeah, I mean, if I sort of went chasing them all, every day, I'd sort of do nothing else. But I think there's some common ones which always come up, which are that gluten or carbohydrates are bad, or that dairy is inflammatory, or you could replace the word dairy with a number of different foods, but dairy seems to be having a moment at the moment. And also this kind of idea that all sugar is bad, or that replacing table sugar with, say, maple syrup is better for you, or more healthy. And the other one, I guess, really big one, is around terminology around foods being either toxins or foods being able to detox you. So the idea that you need to have some kind of like exogenous ingredient to help your body detox, when actually it's got its own inbuilt organs, which is your liver and kidneys. So they're probably my favorites or least favorites.
So the first one you mentioned, carbs. I come from the fitness industry, and we talk about carbs a lot, and I'm not sure where the term was coined, but no carbs before marbs. But what is your opinion on carbs?
So I think we need to fall back in love with them, really. They've had a really bad press over, I guess, like the last 20 years, but sort of protein has developed this health halo. And carbohydrates have really sort of got a lot of bad press, I guess, kind of coming out from the sort of era of the low carb, high fat, or low carb, high protein diets. Carbohydrates are really essential for lots of different things in the body. So they're the preferred fuel source for both your muscles and your brain. You'll know, coming from the fitness background, that they're completely essential if you want to be active, if you have an active lifestyle, if you want to train hard, or you do endurance training. They're essential. If you don't eat enough carbohydrate, you will absolutely hit the wall, and that's nothing to do with your capability. It's the fact that when you are doing high intensity or endurance exercise, your body primarily relies on carbohydrates for fuel. And you also, another thing that people forget is that when they go on low carbohydrate diets, they tend to really reduce the amount of fiber that they eat. And fiber is actually really, really important for your digestive health. And also there's lots of research to suggest that fiber is protective, or can help to protect against the risk of bowel cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. So carbs are important. I'm a real fan.
Okay, so what about those that say, reducing your carbs sends your body into kind of ketosis, and then you burn fat for energy?
I mean, it does if you have a sort of low or no carbohydrate diet. So it'd have to probably be less than sort of 30 grams of carbohydrate a day to put you into that state. And just for context, a banana contains about 30 grams of carbohydrate. Then yes, your body is forced to switch fuel sources. So normally your body will always be burning a mixture of carbohydrate and fat. When you're mostly at rest, it's mostly fat, and then as you sort of get up to go for a walk or do something more active, it's a mixture of fuels. But if you have no carbohydrate available, so if you went on a very low carbohydrate diet, after a day or two, your body will have released all the carbohydrate that it's storing in its muscles and its liver, and there will be nothing for it left to use. So it will be forced to start burning fat for energy. but it's just switched fuel source. It doesn't mean that you're burning, you know, body fat. It's just that the fat that you're consuming will be turned into energy instead. It doesn't mean that you are burning more calories. It doesn't change your metabolic rate or anything like that. So yeah, it's you're just forcing your body to switch energy source. You're not causing yourself to kind of burn more calories or anything else.
Okay. So if someone was on a no carb diet, is there like a set period that you should cut off at? That you shouldn't do it for any longer than that? Does it become dangerous at all?
I guess so. What I would say is like low carbohydrate diet. So, and I'm really looking at this from sort of a more gut health perspective, because this is a particular area of interest to me. So we know that quite within a matter of, say, sort of 2 to 3 days, if you go from a sort of standard, not that many people eat a high fiber diet, but if you go from a diet which does contain carbohydrates with fiber and plenty of fruits and vegetables, to a very low or no carb diet, which would correspondingly have very low in fiber, because we get fiber from carbohydrate foods, then it would start to change the makeup of your gut microbiome in as little as sort of 24 to 48 hours. And actually you need carbohydrates, or the fiber from carbohydrates, to feed your gut microbes, and they do lots of important jobs in your body. So they are really important for your immune function. They even play a role in sort of regulating mood, and potentially stress reactivity as well. And they're really important for your digestive health. So yeah, I would say that I personally, for me, and I also think in terms of sort of mood regulation, having enough, you know, energy for sort of, as you said, like high intensity training, if that's what you like to do. I don't think a very low carbohydrate diet is a great thing to do in the long term, because it actually means limiting a number of food groups which are actually really important for our overall long-term health.
Should we be cutting out any food groups at all?
No. I would say the one exception to that is if you do have a medical condition where you need to limit foods for certain reasons. So I guess an easy example of this would be celiac disease. So somebody with celiac disease absolutely has to strictly avoid gluten or foods containing gluten, because they damage the lining of their intestine due to this, due to the condition that they have. But apart from that, you know, there's no reason to eliminate any food. Yes, some foods that we want to promote in the diet, and there's some foods that we want to consume less of, or have, you know, them to form a smaller part of our diet. But in my experience, eliminating a food only kind of makes it more attractive. You know, when it's kind of off limits, it can have that unhealthy relationship with it. And actually, we can have a bit of everything in our diets and be healthy. That's not the sexy message. No one likes the moderation message, but it's the truth.
Why has dairy had such a bad rap recently?
It's a good question. There's no evidence for it. I had an answer for, I wrote a commentary recently for somebody that was writing a piece on dairy, and someone had, you know, someone else working nutrition, not a dietitian, had made some claims that they said that, you know, dairy was inflammatory and it caused mucus production. And these claims actually have no basis. So, you know, I've previously many times been very diligently through the evidence and through the research, and actually we don't have any research to support these claims. And actually all the research that we do have supports the fact that dairy provides lots of really important nutrients. And my real concern with this is that it's sending a really unhelpful message to young women, and particularly women of childbearing age. So in the UK, dairy is a really, really important source of calcium, but also iodine, and not many people know this. Now, iodine is essential for the thyroid gland, but it's absolutely crucial in early pregnancy for the development of a baby's brain.
Okay.
So my concern is that we've got a lot of young women who are wanting to become mums at some point, and they are avoiding dairy, cutting dairy out their diet because they believe it to be bad for them, and actually having a really low iodine intake as a result, which may affect, you know, which could affect the development of baby's brain. So yeah, I'm happy to follow if anyone's got any specific questions, but I think I don't know where some of these sort of fear-mongering ideas come from. Sometimes with myths, there's like a tiny grain of truth. So if we look at the idea that gluten is bad, for 1 in 100 people in the UK, you know, 1 in 100 people sort of globally have celiac disease. So for that 1%, gluten is damaging for them, for their bodies, because it's an autoimmune condition that causes a reaction. But for the other 99% of people, it's absolutely, you know, it's safe to consume. So I think most myths kind of get exploded from this kind of tiny sort of 1 grain of truth sometimes. And you know what it's like, Chinese whispers. it gets said to one person, somebody else hears it in a conversation at the gym, and all of a sudden, yeah, it's changed into something.
I mean, like, especially when you're searching online, Google and things like that, it's a bit of a minefield. You can do one search which will support one message,
yeah,
do another search and completely contradicts that message. How could people kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it's incredibly hard, and I really appreciate that. And I think if I wasn't in a position that I was to be able to look at something and make a good assessment of it based on my experience, I think I would really struggle as well. And what I would say is that I think it's really important to curate your space, so the space that you're spending time in online. So particularly for Instagram, we've got to remember that, like, you don't need any qualifications to say anything you like on Instagram. Yeah. So I would really encourage people, if they are following people for nutrition and health advice, is to really look at their qualifications. So by the way, this doesn't mean that no one with a qualification ever gets bad advice. Generally speaking, you know, if you're looking to get nutrition advice, be following registered nutritionists, be following dietitians, and try to remember that when somebody's talking about something that's worked for them, that's not good evidence. That's what we call anecdotal evidence. And it's never important, but I think it's really important to remember that it's only that person's experience, and it doesn't mean that it's going to apply to you. So I think curating your space is really important. And I think just when you're doing a Google search, again, you've got to remember that Google isn't ranking that website that you're looking at according to whether it's accurate or not. Yeah. So again, have a look at who's written the article, if possible, you know, who the author is, and also what the website is and what they're trying to get for it. So if you're on a supplement website and it's telling you about why you need supplements, just take it with a grain of salt, because obviously they've got, you know, what's their agenda. And I'm really happy to share with you afterwards a list of kind of what I would call like good websites for nutrition information. So the British Nutrition Foundation, for example, they've got loads of free webinars for the general public. The British Dietetic Association's got lots of really great food fact sheets as well. So there are places you can go. They probably just don't rank the highest in the Google searches.
In terms of diets, are there any kind of diets that you support, or any that you believe are like complete rubbish?
I think the term diets is a really difficult sort of potentially triggering word for people. And the problem is we actually all eat diets. We all have a diet. So trying to sort of look at it from that perspective. And I think the problem in nutrition at the moment, or kind of what I'm noticing in the social media space, is that it seems to be quite dichotomous. You're either really anti-diet or you're pro-diet. There's no kind of between, or you're really anti-carb, or, you know, it's kind of, there's probably be middle ground for everything. And what I would say about diets is that certainly there is a lot of problems in the diet industry, and there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there are a lot of people making money off the back of I would say people's insecurities, but I think it's largely women. Not to say that guys don't also suffer at the hands of the diet.
I mean, in the gym they definitely, you know, fall into that as well. Yeah.
And recently there was a report, actually I was doing a talk for doctors recently, and they asked me why fad diets are so popular. And the answer is that we've been made to feel so bad about our bodies that anything seems attractive. So when we are constantly sold the ideal that there is one type of body shape that is, that is acceptable, and that body shape is slim, it's got a particular skin color and hair color, then automatically we're going to feel bad if we don't fit into that, and we're going to be that place of feeling bad. And then somebody's selling you a diet that will change your body or change your body shape is going to seem more attractive, even if it's against kind of everything that you know is right. It's still attractive. So diets that I would, any kind of really restrictive diet. So diets that cut out whole food groups, diets that have, require you to take lots of supplements, diets that I would say like cause you to feel guilty about eating. They're really, really the ones that I would stay clear of. That said, I think if somebody is wanting to make changes to their diet for themselves, for, I would say the right reasons, then there's absolutely, I don't want people to feel bad about wanting to change their diet or wanting to follow a healthy eating plan. I just think it's kind of looking at our own motivations, and also thinking about what we expect to get as a result of doing diets, remembering that actually, you know, even if we change our body size, that's fundamentally not going to change who we are, and sort of become, I say, comfortable with who we are. And I think body positivity is probably a really hard place for somebody to get to, but maybe even moving to body acceptance can be a first step.
Yeah, no, I truly agree. I mean, me myself, I've tried pretty much all the diets for pure research, really, just to kind of see what works for me. You know, I've done the low carb for a period of time. I've done intermittent fasting more recently.
Yeah.
Would you say any of them are just, you know, just a fad?
I mean, what I would say is that all diets can be effective. So when we look at the research, and if we compare, say, a low carb diet with a low fat diet and maybe an intermittent fasting diet, and they are all isocaloric, so they all provide the same number of calories. If we were looking at it from a weight loss perspective, then there's no one diet that outperforms another for weight loss. We might find that there's differences in, say, people's hunger levels or how easy they find it to stick to the diet, or particularly with fasting or maybe restricting a feeding window, there may be some additional benefits for things like blood glucose control. But broadly speaking, what determines the success of a diet is how well you can stick with it. And that's why there isn't really one approach that suits everybody. So I know some people that a fasting approach has really helped them, and I know other people that set up a bit of a sort of binge starve cycle for them, so that's actually not been a healthy approach. So it's really about thinking about your lifestyle, how food fits into that. If you're someone that loves bread like I do, then doing low carbs probably not going to work for you. But if you're somebody, and I say low carb, that's, you know, low carb could mean anything from, you know, 20 to 40% of your diet, I guess, but because there's no official definition. But I think if you're somebody that actually, you know, is happy to eat a little bit less starchy food at meals, and you find that eating a bit more protein helps to manage your hunger, then maybe that's a great solution for you. But yeah, very individual in that way.
Is it just simply calories in versus calories out? Like if your goal is an aesthetic one and you want to lose fat, like I prefer the term lose fat rather than lose weight.
Yeah.
Is it just a simple calories in versus calories out?
On the most basic level, then yes, like fat loss cannot occur if we're talking about weight loss without there being a calorie deficit. So that is important. But to think that it is only calories that matter is where it's wrong, because there's a lot of nuance involved in that. So and there's this kind of whole idea of like, if it hits your macros, it's fine. But actually, we need to remember that there's lots of things that, you know, feed into your health as well. So you could be eating 1,800 calories of Mars bars, and I guarantee you'd feel quite crap after a week or so. You'd be really constipated as well. So yes, it's like that. There has to be a calorie deficit in order for weight loss to take place. But there's also lots of different ways to achieve that, and lots of different things that feed into that as well. So everything from meal timing to protein intake, all that kind of thing can determine how easily someone might be able to stick to a calorie deficit and therefore achieve fat loss if that was their goal, for example.
Yeah. So is that all what all these diets are, all these kind of name brand diets? They're basically all just bringing you back to a calorie deficit?
For weight loss, I would say that, yeah, fundamentally that's how they're all working. I guess they have different ways of achieving that. So if a diet is, for example, low carb, it's automatically cutting out a lot of foods that you can't eat. So the amount of foods that are available to you are smaller. Probably that results in you eating less calories, and having a higher protein intake tends to mean that people feel less hungry and therefore eat less as a result. So that might be how that's achieving that. If we look at fasting or time restricted feeding, we know that just reducing someone's eating window, say from 15 hours to 12 hours, reduces the number of calories they eat, even if you give them no other instruction. And so therefore that might be a way of someone achieving that in a more gentle approach rather than actually following a diet per se. But yeah, behind it, that's always what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I especially when I'm looking to kind of get really lean, I tend to use MyFitnessPal as an app to kind of track my calories. Do you think those apps serve a good purpose, or do you think they kind of can send someone into that bad relationship with food?
I think I've seen both, to be honest. So I've used food diaries with some of the people that I've worked with before to really positive effect. And I think it's a great way for somebody to understand more of their own habits and look for patterns. And it's really helpful for me as well when I'm working with somebody. And for some people, tracking their food intake is really, really helpful, and can help them move towards a healthier diet. But I think for some people, it kind of creates a quite sort of obsessive need to track their calories, and they start to feel guilty if they don't track them. They start to feel guilty if at the weekend they don't track them. And if you start to notice those signs in yourself, it's a really good time to start to pull away, because carrying on down that path will probably mean it becomes quite complicated for you to sort of become away from that. And I don't want to, I mean, far back as I think 2008, we started to get studies which showed that people who kept a food diary lost more weight than people that didn't. So all other things being considered. And that's because the minute you start to track something, your attention is focused on it. So you start to pay more attention and be a bit more mindful perhaps. But we've also seen that for some people, sort of tracking over and over again actually starts for them to lose their own trust in themselves to be able to regulate their food intake. And rather than then starting to pay attention to their hunger and satiety levels, they're completely reliant on a food diary to manage their food intake. And that's never a place that I would want somebody to be.
I mean, for me, I like to recommend a client track for a couple of weeks, just to kind of get their mind around what kind of equates to a certain number of calories. Because a lot of people, they're completely unaware of how much, a slice of bread, how many calories that is. So it's kind of hard without tracking it for you to know how many calories you're taking in. And especially if you want to get to a calorie deficit, it's like, how else will you know that you're hitting a deficit without tracking? But I do know that after 2 weeks, it is a good idea to kind of cut off, because then you do get quite obsessive with it.
Yeah, it can be a really helpful start point. And this is, again, why I think it's a really individual thing. So for some people, and again, this might sound like a broad generalization, but it's my experience of working with people, that I would say most women know exactly how many calories are in everything. And, a more focus on calories is not necessarily helpful. But we could look at thinking about food groups or feeding windows or eating windows, for example. Whereas someone who comes to you and says, I've never done it, I've never attempted to lose weight in my life, I've no idea how many calories is in this. Yes, that would be really helpful for that person. So I think it depends a lot on someone's previous dieting history and their relationship with weight and food.
Okay. All right, let's shift the conversation away from aesthetic, because I don't want to focus on that too much. Especially during this pandemic, a lot of people have been under a lot of stress. It's been really difficult for many people, for most of us, I imagine. How does food affect your mood?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it can affect mood both on a long-term and a short-term basis. So there are certain nutrients that are really important for your brain and your brain to function well. That includes things like omega-3, which is the essential fatty acid. Most of us associate it with oily fish. Also, staying hydrated is really important for your brain as well. Carbohydrates really important for your brain. Your brain actually uses about 20% of the calories you consume every day entirely from glucose. So yeah, there's certain nutrients which over time sort of help to maintain your brain's health, I guess. And then we sort of see more association. So we see people that tend to follow a more kind of Mediterranean style diet have less incidence. Populations who follow a Mediterranean style diet have less incidence of mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. So this isn't cause and effect, but we're just looking at dietary patterns. And then on a short-term basis, we know that...
Sorry to cut you there. For anyone who's unaware of a Mediterranean diet, what kind of foods is that?
So lots of brightly coloured fruits and vegetables, whole grains, quite a prominent fish intake as well, and olive oil is the predominant fat in the diet. So those are some of the kind of key markers, and plenty of nuts and seeds as well.
And are there some foods that kind of affect your mood negatively?
I guess there's some foods, yeah. So we know that, as I said, so diets which are really rich in fruits and vegetables and oily fish are associated with a lower risk of depression and anxiety. And equally, we know that diets that are low in those foods are associated with an increased risk. So diets that tend to be high in saturated fat and high in kind of added sugars are more associated with an increased risk. That doesn't mean those foods are causing it. It just means actually maybe it's what's missing from the diet is actually meaning that it's affecting kind of our sort of mental health. And then obviously, I think most of us are aware that there's certain foods that can give us a little bit of a lift or can kind of boost our mood on a short-term basis. So a lot of us use caffeine to sort of help us feel more alert and awake. And that does have an effect, but we also need to think about our sleep at the other end of the day as well. And foods that are kind of high in sort of sugar really light up the pleasure centers in our brain. So when we have those foods and we kind of think, oh, I feel kind of happy or comforted, our brain remembers that and reminds us about it next time. The problem is they only tend to sort of give us that lift for quite a short period. And so it's actually better to kind of choose foods which have sort of more sustained energy. Yeah,
because I mean, like during the first period of lockdown, I've never kind of understood comfort eating before this lockdown period, but I was eating foods that I've not eaten in years. You know, I was eating crisps daily. I was eating a lot of bread, a lot of cheese. I've kind of, you know, cleaned it up now. But is there something in comfort eating?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the name's it. Yeah, the clue's in the name. But I guess the first thing I want to say is like we tend to think of comfort eating as bad, like it's really, or emotional eating is often framed as bad, but actually it's really serving a purpose. So it's a coping tool, much like, you know, some of us might find that going out for a run really helps us to cope with stress, but it is a coping tool and it is serving a purpose. So first of all, I know it's difficult, but trying to leave the guilt to the door, because if we kind of come at it with that's really bad, we kind of lose any opportunity to learn what it might be telling us or what it might be trying to kind of nudge us towards. So yes, food is a valid coping tool and it can help us in times of stress. The problem is we don't want it to be our only coping tool. So if we find ourselves doing a lot of comfort eating or emotional eating, it's a really good opportunity to check in with ourselves and think, what else might I be needing? And obviously we were all thrown into this situation earlier in the year, which we're like totally unexpected. And also cut off all our normal coping mechanisms. So maybe we'd normally like go out with the girls or like call a friend or like go out, you know, we were kind of limited even on our exercise or go and burn it off at the gym or whatever it was, see our families. You know, we were so limited in what was available to us that actually we're at home, food's in front of us, like it served a purpose. So it's not bad, but obviously it's a really good opportunity to think about what else might be able to help us. So checking in with ourselves and, you know, if we're lonely, I guess appreciating food for what it is that it can help us in that moment. But it's just in the longer term, there are usually more effective coping strategies.
Yeah. So what would a healthy diet look like?
I think most of us probably, if I asked sort of 100 people to sit down and write down what they thought, I kind of get the feeling that most people would know. It's just that we sort of tend to get it skewed then sort of by, as you said, sort of maybe these, you know, other kind of myths or, you know, whatever story is doing the rounds. But essentially a diet that contains lots of fruits and vegetables, has whole grains in it, so things like wholemeal bread, whole grain pasta, that includes like lean proteins, whether that's from animals or plants, whatever it is, that whatever you like, that's cool. That has fish a couple of times a week, contains some dairy foods if they agree, you know, if you get along fine with those, and also does include food for pleasure. So food is nutrition, it's obviously fuel for life and exercise, but it does also, it is comfort and enjoyment and, you know, social time as well. So there should also be pleasure foods in a healthy diet, because that kind of is essential to our mental health as, you know, as anything else.
Okay. Right, I've got some questions for you that were kind of posed by the group that I want to ask you. Also, if there's anyone in the room who wants to ask something specifically, write it in the comments and I'll ask Laura this. I can see that we're kind of running low on time. So yeah, put your questions in the comments. So Laura, I've got a few questions for you. One is, as you get older, does your metabolism naturally slow down?
It does, but probably not for the reason that people think. So I think there is it's basically because you lose muscle mass as you get older.
Okay.
So one of the kind of biggest determinants of your metabolic rate, or how many calories your body uses in a day,
Yeah.
is the amount of muscle on your body. And as we age, it's probably actually from, so my age, I'm like late 30s now, so it's probably from about this age that we start to lose muscle every single year. So
Okay.
and as you lose muscle, and this is just kind of a natural, you know, it happens naturally. So as you lose muscle, our metabolic rate will naturally reduce. So this is why it's actually so important as we get older, not just to do the kind of exercise that we all think of as exercise, so the more kind of cardiovascular stuff, so like walking, jogging, but also to do strength training. In the UK, the sort of physical activity guidelines are to do 150 minutes of sort of moderate intensity, so like you're walking, swimming, cycling, but also to do strength training twice a week, and also balance exercises as well. And that will help to offset that kind of natural decline in metabolic rate as you get older.
Great, good to know. What are the negative effects of losing weight too fast?
Excuse me, crunching eyes. The negative effects of losing weight too fast. So what I would say is, if you're losing weight really rapidly, your diet is probably extremely limited. So actually, on average, there's lots of nuances to this as well, but approximately, in order to lose a pound of body fat per week, or a pound of weight, body fat, it would be about 500 calorie deficit a day, which is reasonable for most people. But the smaller you are, or the less weight you have to lose, kind of the harder that is to achieve. And at the top end of the scale, if you have got more weight to lose, or you do have a sort of higher a daily expenditure, then you might be able to cut back a bit more, and that might be achievable for you. But yeah, if you're losing weight very rapidly, so losing, say, more than 1 kilo a week, then actually I would probably guess that you're having to follow a really restricted diet. And again, that's going to be hard for your body to get all the nutrition that it needs, and to stay healthy. So you might be able to do that short term, but I would think long term it would be really
What
difficult.
would be your recommended amount of weight to lose per week, healthily?
Probably most people have seen it quoted millions of times before, but it is about 0.5 kilo a week. And that's probably, I think, really comfortable for most people. And weight loss is never linear. So weight doesn't go down like this. It tends to be like a squiggly line all over the place. Don't expect to lose the same amount of weight every week. You'll probably find, if you're on a weight loss plan, that you would lose quite a lot of weight in the first week, but actually it's going to be probably a mixture of like body fat and also water weight. So that's very normal when you first start losing weight. And over time, it will come down. And I guess what you want to do is look from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, because sometimes looking from week to week can not be the best reflection of progress. And also for women, things like menstrual cycle as well affect how much fluids we retain. So you'll definitely probably see changes in your body weight probably the week before and the week of your period.
And are there changes in your eating habits as well?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of research that suggests that so women experience more food cravings before their menstrual cycle. It's definitely my experience and a lot of people that I work with. But there's no evidence to suggest that this is some kind of nutrient deficiency. There isn't any evidence for that with any types of craving. But most of the research suggested that it's kind of related to maybe changes in mood as well. And actually it comes back to that maybe comfort factor, and actually maybe using food to soothe us rather than anything else. But yeah, it generally doesn't tend to be really long lasting. It's not something to worry about. And actually you'll probably find, if you track it yourself, that you'll be able to see those patterns.
Okay. Right, so guys, if you do have any questions, we've just got 3 more, so please put them in the comments. Okay, at particular times of day, should I eat specific foods?
I guess I guess it depends what you're doing in a day.
Okay.
So if you were going out to do a long run, for example, then I would say, and the meal that you're going to be eating before that, you would want to have some carbohydrates to make sure that was sort of what we call carbohydrate availability, so you're making sure there's enough sort of energy for your body to sort of fuel that run. Equally, if you were going out to do an exam in the morning, or some hard work in the morning, so we've got quite a lot of research to show that eating a meal, so eating breakfast, people tend to do kind of better in tests and that type of thing, and it's just because you're giving your brain some energy in the morning. But also caffeine, you might want to have a coffee in the morning because that increases alertness, and if you have it first thing, obviously it's less likely to affect your sleep. So I'd probably say it depends what you're doing. Yeah, sorry, that's not very
No. Does what I eat affect my sleep or quality of sleep?
Yes, it can do. So going back to it, so I guess we could look at food and drinks, but 2 drinks that are worth mentioning is caffeine. So on average, it takes about 6 hours for the amount of caffeine in your blood to fall by half. Okay. So just say you had a coffee at 4 and you're like, it's hours away from bedtime. You went to bed at 10. There's still half the amount of caffeine floating around in your blood. So that will, and what we know is that having caffeine in the few hours before bed does increase the amount of time it takes for you to get to sleep. So definitely that can affect your sleep. And alcohol as well. It's really easy to misinterpret the effects of alcohol on sleep because alcohol's a sedative, so the first couple of drinks can actually make you feel quite sleepy, and actually if you had quite a big night on the sauce, you probably fall asleep really fast. So you can misinterpret that as meaning that alcohol helps you sleep, but it's effectively like a false sleep because it's kind of causing you to fall asleep because it's a sedative, and as the alcohol wears off, you'll either wake up early or you'll wake up several times during the night. And it also affects the amount of restful sleep that you get. So yeah, sorry everybody, but having too much alcohol in one go is not good for your sleep. And then food wise, probably the main thing I'd say is not eating too close to bedtime. So you want to have probably like 2 to 3 hours after your ideally after your last meal before you go to bed. Because that reduces things like heartburn and kind of discomfort when you go to bed, and also because your body is really like, your body's on a 24-hour clock, so this is like the circadian rhythm, and so everything starts to slow down at night. And so if you're kind of eating during your biological nighttime, that can confuse your body and affect things like sleep and also how you sort of metabolize food sort of later on in the day. So kind of trying to eat earlier and not too close to bedtime, and those kind of things are probably what I would say are the most important.
Okay, final question. Can I still enjoy my favorite foods and lose weight?
Yes, definitely. So yeah, I think as we've sort of talked about several times tonight, it's a myth to think that you need to eliminate all foods, or it's a myth to think that sugar's bad, for example. I'm like I said, a firm believer, although it's not the sexy message, is that moderation is really important. And I've seen this time and time again with people, I would actually say that including your favorite foods in a weight loss approach is actually really important to you succeeding, because it will help you you're not going to get that sense of being deprived. You're not going to get that sort of sense of you can't have something so you want it more. And also just being able to enjoy your favorite foods is really important kind of psychologically as well, I think. And so making sure that you include some or write them in, or however you're approaching this, I think is really important. I think for most people that's the message that I would want you to understand.
That's a great note to end on. I can imagine a lot of people being happy with that. Laura, this has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. You've dropped so many gems that I'm going to have to watch this back as well. Really appreciate you taking the time out on your Sunday to join us. I'm going to put your tag in the comments so that people can follow you, and if they do want to have a session or anything like that, they can contact you. But it's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much.
Thanks. I don't always, since lockdown I don't get to do talks anymore, so it's really nice to actually come on and have a natter and get quizzed. So thanks for joining in. And if there's anything that you kind of think of like questions and that you think of after this talk's ended, you know, do drop me a DM, and I will do my best to answer them for you.
And she does get back to you very quickly. Well,
Thanks
thank you, Laura.
Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I thoroughly enjoyed that, as you can see by the length of time that we were speaking. Great conversation. Hopefully there's a few gems for you there. There's definitely some for me. Like I said, I'm going to